My name is Vance, and this story takes place when I was around 5 or 6 years old, living with my family on the outskirts of Omaha, Nebraska. Our home was a modest 2-story house, tucked away on a quiet street that seemed to be forgotten by time. If you stood out front, you'd notice a lonely streetlight off to the left, casting a pale glow over the pavement. My room was on the right side of the house, perpetually shrouded in its shadow, as if the house itself was hiding me from the world. Before I dive into the strange events of that night, there's a bit of background you need to understand. When I was a kid, the other children at school used to tease me mercilessly. They said my eyes turned red when I got angry, calling me hurtful names and spreading rumors. One day, I came home from school to find something written in large, jagged letters on my bedroom window. Demon. Someone had gone to great lengths to do this, using a ladder that we kept behind the house. The ladder hadn't been moved in ages, and it left clear marks in the weeds and dirt below my window. I was furious. In a fit of rage, I picked up a rock and hurled it at the window, shattering the glass. My father had to cover it with a garbage bag and duct tape, and I got into a lot of trouble for that. But the damage was done. The nickname stuck, and I felt like I was living under a dark cloud. It was a summer night, close to midnight, when the events of this story began. I woke up needing to go to the bathroom, but I was wide awake and full of energy. The idea of sneaking in some late-night video game time was too tempting to resist. I crept back to my room, careful not to wake my parents, and turned on my old console. The glow of the screen was a comforting presence in the otherwise dark room. About an hour later, around 1 a.m., I heard a faint scream from outside. It was the kind of sound that sends a chill down your spine, even if you can't quite place why. It was unmistakably a woman's scream, and though I was scared, curiosity got the better of me. I quietly went downstairs to look out the living room window. What I saw was like something out of a nightmare. The entire room was bathed in an eerie red light. It was so surreal. It felt like I had stepped into another world. The familiar furniture and items around me suddenly seemed alien and threatening. I looked up to see that the windows were covered with some kind of paper-like material, soaked in what appeared to be blood. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. I ran back upstairs, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I climbed onto the windowsill in my room, careful not to cut myself on the shards of glass still clinging to the frame, and peered through the unbroken part of the window. There, at the edge of the circle of light cast by the street lamp, was the shape of a man crouching over a woman who lay motionless on the ground. The man was wearing an orange short-sleeved shirt and jeans, while the woman was dressed in business casual attire, a white collared shirt, a black skirt, and stockings. Her hair was mostly brown but had a streak of blue running through it. The sight of her lying there so still made my stomach churn. As I watched in horror, the man looked up. His face was so pale it almost glowed in the dark, and dark red stains smeared his mouth and chin. That's when I realized what I was seeing, a vampire. The sheer shock of that realization nearly made me lose my balance. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I was paralyzed with fear. He glared at me, his eyes full of malice and hunger. Then, as if sensing he had been discovered, he scooped the woman up and dashed away with inhuman speed. It was so fast, it was almost like he vanished into thin air. I stayed frozen at the window for what felt like an eternity, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. Eventually, I climbed down and went back downstairs. The red light and the paper-covered windows were gone. Everything looked normal again. But the memory of that horrifying scene was burned into my mind. The next morning, I felt compelled to go outside and check the spot where the attack had occurred. I found small spots of blood on the pavement and a silver necklace, half buried in the dirt. I picked it up, cleaned it, and kept it as a grim memento of that night. I still have it to this day, a reminder of the horrors I witnessed. In the days following the incident, I began having terrible nightmares. In my dreams, my hands were drenched in blood. They soon evolved into more vivid nightmares where my entire house was spattered with it. My bed, the floor, the ceiling, and the walls. It was like living in a slaughterhouse. Every night, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. A few days later, I woke up with a sharp pain in my arm. Looking down, I saw a deep bite mark, oozing blood. Panic set in as I realized the mark was too deep to be a scratch from a random accident. I quickly showered and covered it up, not wanting anyone to see. I knew no one would believe me, and I already had a reputation for being a demon at school. I didn't want my mother to think I was hurting myself either, so I kept quiet, bearing the fear and confusion alone. As I grew older, I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was just my overactive imagination, fueled by the bullying and the nickname that haunted me. But the vividness of the memory and the bite mark on my arm made it hard to dismiss. I truly believe that what I saw that night was real, that I had a brush with the supernatural. Despite the trauma, life went on. The nightmares eventually faded, though the memory of that night remained clear. I moved away from Omaha, started a new life, and tried to put the past behind me. But every now and then, something would trigger the memory, and I'd find myself back in that darkened room, staring out the window at the vampire with blood on his face. Hey, my friend, if you're into paranormal stories, the weird, and the unexplained, we'd love for you to join our expanding community. Hit the subscribe button and enable notifications to stay tuned for upcoming episodes. If you want to show some love for the channel, simply give us a like. Now, on to story 2. It was around 6 p.m. in November 2018, a typical chilly evening in England. By this time of the year, darkness had already settled in, wrapping everything in a thick, cold blanket. I had just gotten home from work, feeling the weariness of the day starting to set in. I was 17 at the time, a junior in high school, and evenings like these were my respite from the daily grind. Our 2-story detached house in West Belfast was my sanctuary. After grabbing a snack from the kitchen, I made my way upstairs to my room. I kicked off my shoes and plopped down on my bed, ready to unwind with some YouTube videos. My room was a cozy haven with posters of my favorite bands and movies adorning the walls, and a desk cluttered with books and gaming gear. As I settled in, my mom shouted up to me, letting me know she was going to pick up my brother from work and would stop at the gas station on the way back. She asked if I wanted to come along, but I was already too comfortable, so I declined. I heard her close the front door and the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway. Being home alone at night was nothing new to me. At 17, I relished the freedom and independence it offered. The house was silent except for the hum of my laptop and the occasional rustling of my cat, Felix, who was sprawled at the foot of my bed. About 10 minutes later, just as I was getting engrossed in my video, I heard a noise coming from downstairs. At first, I dismissed it, thinking Felix had knocked something over or was hunting for food in his empty bowl. But then I remembered Felix was right there with me, lounging lazily. I paused my video, straining to listen more closely. The noise was faint but persistent, a subtle banging sound coming from the back door. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to rationalize the sound. Maybe it was just the wind. I tried to focus back on my video, but the banging continued, accompanied by the unmistakable jangle of keys. My heart started to race. My initial thought was that my mom had dropped my brother off and was heading to the gas station, and my brother was just trying to go outside. It made sense, but something felt off. The banging grew louder and more insistent. I decided to check it out, hoping to alleviate my growing anxiety. I walked out of my room slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached the top of the stairs, I stopped and listened again. It definitely wasn't my brother. The realization sent a wave of fear through me. What if someone was trying to break in? I'm a naturally anxious person, prone to imagining the worst in situations like this. But this time, my fear felt justified. Summoning all my courage, I decided to confront whatever was causing the noise. I walked down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I turned the corner into the kitchen, I heard a loud bang and the sound of footsteps running away. My breath caught in my throat. The cat flap had been ripped off the door, and pieces of plastic were scattered everywhere. I stood there, frozen in fear, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The back door was still shut, but the evidence was clear. Someone had been trying to get in. My mind raced with thoughts of what could have happened if they had succeeded. I forced myself to stay calm and called my mom, hoping for some reassurance. My brother answered her phone, still in the car with her. "Are you at home?" I asked, my voice trembling. "No, we're still on our way back." "Why?" he replied, sounding puzzled. My heart sank. "Please be serious. Are you at home right now?" I asked again, desperation creeping into my voice. "No, I'm not." "What's going on?" he asked, his tone turning serious as he heard the fear in my voice. I explained what had happened, my words tumbling out in a rush. My brother, usually the nonchalant type, started shouting at me to call the police. I hung up and dialed 999, trying to keep my voice steady as I described the situation to the dispatcher. I locked myself in my room, clutching the phone with white-knuckled hands, listening to every creak and groan of the house. Just as I finished explaining, I heard more noises downstairs, voices and the sound of doors banging. They were back. I burst into tears, my fear overwhelming me. The dispatcher stayed on the line, trying to keep me calm until help arrived. It felt like an eternity, but finally, I heard my mom's car pull up, followed by the sound of multiple footsteps rushing into the house. My mom, brother, and the police all arrived at the same time. They charged through the house, heading straight for the back door. It was clear what had happened. The intruders had seen the keys to the back door on the kitchen counter. They had taken a broom from outside, broken it in half, and used it to fish the keys through the cat flap. But in their haste, they had also broken the door handle, making it impossible to open the door from the outside. If they hadn't done that, they would have gotten in easily, and I would have been completely oblivious upstairs. The police searched the area but found no sign of the intruders. It was evident they had been watching the house, waiting for the right moment to strike. The thought of being watched sent another shiver down my spine. We were incredibly lucky that night. After the police left, my mom and brother hugged me tightly, their relief palpable. We sat in the living room, trying to process what had happened. The adrenaline rush was wearing off, leaving us all feeling exhausted and shaky. We discussed what we could do to prevent something like this from happening again. The next day, we changed all the locks and installed additional security measures. Despite the increased security, the experience left a lasting impact on me. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little noise. The sense of safety and security I had always felt in my home was shattered. It took a long time to rebuild that sense of trust, and even now, the memory of that night lingers. I'm a 37-year-old woman, and the house I grew up in holds memories both cherished and eerie. Nestled within its weathered walls are tales that still send shivers down my spine. Built over a century ago, this house has seen generations of my family, with my dad spending his entire life under its roof, just as his parents did before him. One of the most enduring mysteries of our home centers around the attic, expanded into 2 bedrooms by my grandparents long ago. The back bedroom, where my sister and I spent our childhood nights, overlooks the living room below. It was there, in the quiet solitude of the house, that peculiar things began to unfold. I vividly recall countless instances when I was alone downstairs, engrossed in reading or simply enjoying the peacefulness, only to be startled by sudden crashes from above. Each time, I would rush upstairs, heart racing, expecting to find a mess or an intruder, only to discover everything in its place, as though nothing had happened at all. For years, I kept these experiences to myself, convinced that speaking up would only invite skepticism. It wasn't until one evening, over dinner with my mom and sister, that I finally broached the subject. To my surprise, they exchanged looks of astonishment, admitting they too had heard inexplicable noises emanating from the upper floors. Perhaps the most chilling encounter occurred when I was 16, lost in the world of Super Mario World on my bedroom's old TV. Positioned in the alcove with my back to the room, I would catch glimpses of movement in the window's reflection during the game's brief blackouts. One such moment revealed a figure standing behind me. Thinking it was my dad, I turned swiftly, ready to jest about his stealthy approach. But the room was empty. The figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Perplexed, I restarted the game multiple times, but the spectral image never returned. When I later described what I saw to my dad, his initial surprise gave way to a solemn acknowledgement. He revealed that I had described his own father, who had passed away long before my birth. Yet, soon after, he dismissed the conversation altogether, as if uncomfortable with the topic. The most unnerving incident unfolded a year later, on a stifling summer afternoon before we had central air conditioning. With windows flung open to invite any breath of breeze, I sat engrossed at the computer when the heavy front door abruptly swung shut and latched. The distinctive sound echoed through the house, followed by footsteps that seemed to move from the door, past me, and into the kitchen. As I sat frozen in disbelief, the air filled with the soft, haunting melody of a woman humming. The familiarity of the tune evoked a mixture of comfort and unease, as though an unseen presence moved effortlessly through the familiar rooms. Even now, years later, these memories linger vividly in my mind. Despite the rational understanding that our house harbors no malice, I can't shake the unease that settles upon me whenever I find myself alone within its aging embrace. The house, with its creaking floors and whispering walls, holds secrets that defy explanation, reminding me that sometimes the most haunting mysteries are those closest to home. I've always had a penchant for the strange and the unusual. Growing up, I experienced a handful of paranormal encounters that both intrigued and unsettled me. These experiences mostly fizzled out as I got older, but one particular incident, which happened when I was around 21 or 22, still lingers in my mind. Now at 30, I can recall it with a vividness that still sends shivers down my spine. Back then, I was renting a room in my friend Mark's house. It was a cozy 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. My room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the street through a single window. I shared the room with my dog, Bella, a loyal and protective female boxer. Bella was more than just a pet. She was my companion, my guardian. One night, Bella jumped onto my bed, blocking my view of the television. It was a typical evening, and I was winding down with some late-night TV. I tried nudging her with my feet, but she wouldn't budge. Instead, she started growling, a low, menacing sound, her gaze fixed on the window. Her behavior was unusual and unnerving. Bella was generally a calm dog, only growling when something was really off. Trying to shake off the eerie feeling, I turned off the TV and decided to call it a night. I crawled under the covers, but Bella continued to growl. Eventually, her growling subsided, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up again, but I was jolted from my sleep by an intense, bright light piercing through my blinds. Annoyed, I got up, wondering which car had its lights on so bright that they were shining into my bedroom. But this light was different, unnaturally bright, like nothing I had ever seen before. I walked over to the window, my fingers parting the blinds. As soon as I peeked through, everything went blank. The next thing I remember is opening my eyes in a completely different place. I was standing in a room unlike any I had ever seen. It was metallic, with no seams, just perfectly curved metal walls. The room had an otherworldly quality, cold and sterile, yet somehow smooth and almost organic in its design. In front of me was a metallic bed, more like a rectangular slab, with a dull gray color. It seemed to be the focal point of the room. I sensed movement behind me and realized I wasn't alone. There were beings, though I couldn't see them clearly, guiding me towards the bed. We communicated, but not with words. It was a form of telepathy, a silent exchange of thoughts and intentions. They didn't seem hostile. They were just guiding me, almost gently, to the metallic bed. I found myself standing right in front of the bed, and just like that, I was back in my bedroom. I was standing in the middle of the room, my back to the window. The transition was jarring. One moment I was in that strange metallic room, and the next, I was back home, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I woke up feeling extremely nauseous. My stomach churned, and I stumbled out of bed, barely making it downstairs. I was also incredibly hungry, a ravenous hunger that I couldn't explain. I poured myself a bowl of cereal, but as I reached for the milk, I felt an overwhelming urge to vomit. I ran to the sink, which faced the backyard, and that's when I saw Bella. She was outside, running around the yard, but she should have been in my room. Seeing Bella in the yard triggered a flood of memories. Everything from the previous night came rushing back. The bright light, the metallic room, the beings guiding me. I ran back upstairs to check my room. The sight that greeted me was startling. The furniture was in disarray, as if a small tornado had swept through. My 3 blankets, which I always used to keep warm during the winter, were neatly arranged in perfect spiral designs on my bed. It was as if someone, or something, had meticulously placed them there. I destroyed the spirals, trying to convince myself that it was all a bad dream. But deep down, I knew something inexplicable had happened. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in myself. I had trouble speaking, stuttering over simple words. Reading became a challenge, as I struggled to comprehend sentences unless I read them slowly, multiple times. It was as if my cognitive abilities had been impaired. Nearly a year passed before anything unusual happened again. One evening, I was home alone, lying in bed and trying to relax. Mark was working late, so the house was quiet. Suddenly, a bright light shot through my room, just like before. This time, the house began to rumble. It felt like an earthquake, the entire structure shaking violently for about 5 seconds. Fear gripped me as I recognized the light and the rumbling. I knew what was happening, but just as quickly as it had started, the light disappeared and the rumbling ceased. I was left shaken but unharmed. Strangely, after that night, my speech and reading abilities gradually returned to normal. It was as if whatever had affected me before had been reversed. Life slowly went back to its regular rhythm, but the memories of those nights never faded. My family moved into our quaint old house when I was just a toddler of 2. It was the kind of place that seemed frozen in time, its sturdy stone walls telling tales of late 1800s craftsmanship. Nestled in a quiet corner of rural America, it wasn't uncommon to find such historic gems, though little did we know the mysteries that lay within. I grew up with a curious mind and a thirst for adventure, but I was also a skeptic when it came to anything supernatural. My older sister, Emma, on the other hand, was more sensitive to things beyond the ordinary. One warm summer day, when I was around 4 and Emma 7, we were playing in the backyard. Our garden stretched out to meet open fields, a serene backdrop to our childhood. The day in question was sweltering, the air thick with the scent of drying firewood stacked at the garden's edge. These massive piles, towering nearly 6 feet high and stretching several yards long, were a playground in themselves. As Emma and I took a break from our play, I dashed indoors for a drink, leaving Emma to her own devices among the stacks. When I returned moments later, Emma wore a puzzled and somewhat frightened expression. Curious, I asked her what had happened. She hesitated before recounting how, in my absence, she had seen a head peeking up from behind one of the wood piles, moving stealthily along its length. At first, she thought it was our dad, trying to playfully scare her. Determined to catch him in the act, she tiptoed along the front of the stack, expecting to surprise him at the end. Yet, when she reached the pile's corner and peered around, there was no one there. Instead, she was enveloped in an unexplained chill, despite the summer heat pushing temperatures past 90 degrees. Our dad, as it turned out, had been inside the entire time, chatting with our mom in the kitchen. Our backyard was fenced off, and being in a small village, it was inconceivable that anyone could have snuck in unseen. This encounter marked Emma's first brush with the paranormal, setting a tone for the years to come. As for me, I remained skeptical through my childhood and teenage years. I never saw or heard anything unusual, so I chalked it up to Emma's vivid imagination. Our mother, however, had her own experiences, particularly at night when our dad worked the late shift. Our trusty German shepherd, Max, was our sentinel, guarding us through the quiet hours. Living in a tight-knit community, we felt safe in our solitude, but eerie occurrences were not uncommon. 20 years later, long after we had all moved away, my mother confided in me about a chilling incident she had experienced one restless night. Awakened by Max's frantic barking, she initially dismissed it as his usual reaction to some nocturnal visitor, perhaps a rabbit or a wayward raccoon. But as she lay awake, preparing to get up for a glass of water, a shadow began to materialize in the doorway of her bedroom. She described it to me as a dark, amorphous mass that seemed to peel itself away from the walls and floor, hovering ominously in the center of the room. It resembled the silhouette of a large stingray, with a featureless head floating within its murky form. Frozen with fear, she could only watch as it extended its ethereal tendrils toward her, reaching out with an intent she couldn't comprehend. Just as it seemed about to make contact, the apparition dissolved into thin air, leaving her shaken and bewildered. That night left an indelible mark on her, reinforcing her belief in forces beyond our understanding. For me, hearing her recount this tale decades later sparked a shift in my own perspective. My first personal encounter with the inexplicable happened after my grandmother's passing. Our extended family had gathered at our childhood home, reminiscing after the somber rituals of her funeral. Hours passed in quiet reflection until a sudden disturbance shattered the calm. A rapid succession of rings from the cordless phone, an unsettling cacophony we had never heard before. My mother, ever the steadfast one, answered the call, only to be greeted by eerie static on the other end. Oddly, there was no record of any incoming call on the phone's display. That night, as I lay in bed, reflecting on the day's events, I felt a gentle tug on my blanket, as if someone unseen was pulling it down from my shoulder. Then, a warm, comforting pressure settled on me, a sensation of reassurance and presence, though the room was empty and the doors securely closed. In that moment, I knew it was my grandmother, bidding her final farewell in a way only she could. Similar experiences had touched the lives of everyone closest to her, reaffirming the bonds that transcended the veil between this world and whatever lies beyond. These encounters, shared across generations in our family, reshaped my beliefs and opened my eyes to the mysteries that linger in the corners of our existence. They taught me that some things defy explanation, urging me to embrace the unknown with humility and wonder. It happened not long after I celebrated my 15th birthday, an age that felt like the cusp of something exciting and new. For my birthday, my parents gifted me an Xbox, a dream come true for any teenager. They even set me up with my own monitor, allowing me to play in the privacy of my room upstairs. It was a small sanctuary, my personal haven where I could escape into worlds of adventure and camaraderie with friends, all without ever leaving my room. My room was my kingdom, located at the top of a narrow staircase that creaked with every step, a characteristic I usually found endearing. It had a cozy corner where my Xbox setup resided, bathed in the soft glow of a desk lamp. Posters of my favorite games and movies adorned the walls, and the bed was always unmade, a testament to my teenage priorities. On this particular Saturday night, my parents were out of town for a work convention. They traveled often for their jobs, which meant I was used to having the house to myself on weekends. This time, however, felt different. There was a certain thrill to it, a sense of independence that was both exhilarating and slightly unnerving. I was deeply engrossed in a game, chatting with two of my closest friends, Matt and Jason, through the Xbox party chat. We were strategizing our next move, our voices a mix of excitement and concentration. The volume on my headphones was turned up high, almost drowning out the world around me. My friends and I often lost track of time this way, our conversations filled with laughter, banter, and the occasional shout of triumph or frustration. Suddenly, during a brief lull in our conversation, I heard a faint thumping sound from downstairs. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination, a trick of the mind amplified by the solitude of the house. But then it happened again, a distinct thump that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned down the volume and took one headphone off my ear, straining to hear any other sounds. "Hey, did you guys hear that?" I asked, my voice tinged with unease. Matt and Jason chuckled, brushing it off as nerves. They joked about it being a ghost or a burglar, their laughter attempting to mask any real concern. "Come on, man, go check it out," Jason teased. "Maybe it's your cat." We didn't have a cat, but I laughed along, feeling a bit foolish for being so easily spooked. I agreed to investigate during our next break in the game, hoping it was nothing more than the house settling or a tree branch against a window. When the break came, I reluctantly removed my headphones and stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence of the house was deafening, every creak and groan amplified in the stillness. I started walking towards the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Halfway down, I froze, hearing something that made my blood run cold. Soft whispering. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. I crouched down, peering into the dimly lit living room. There, moving silently like shadows, were four fully grown men dressed completely in black. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't process what I was seeing. My body acted on instinct, crawling back up the stairs as quietly as possible. But as fate would have it, one of the steps let out a loud creak, echoing through the house. My heart stopped. There was no way they didn't hear that. I scrambled to my room, hands shaking as I grabbed my headset. "Guys, call the police," I whispered urgently. "There are men in my house." Matt and Jason fell silent, their earlier jovial tone replaced with alarm. "Are you serious?" Matt asked, his voice tight with concern. "Just do it, please," I begged, dropping the headset on my desk. I knew I had to find a place to hide. Locking myself in my room seemed too obvious, so I opted for the bathroom further down the hall. I locked the door and turned off the light, leaving it slightly ajar in the hopes it would look unoccupied. The sound of boots on the stairs sent my heart into overdrive. They were coming. I held my breath, listening to the heavy footsteps growing closer. Then, a loud banging on my bedroom door echoed through the hall, followed by muffled voices demanding I open the door. Fear gripped me. I couldn't stay here. I had to escape. Moving as silently as possible, I crept to the bathroom window. The old frame resisted, but I managed to pry it open, the cool night air rushing in. I climbed out just as the bathroom door swung open. I didn't look back, diving headfirst onto the grass below. Pain shot through my neck and shoulders as I landed awkwardly, but adrenaline pushed me to my feet. I glanced back at the house, seeing a silhouette in the bathroom window. My heart pounded as I heard the backyard door slide open, and 3 of the men came rushing out. They were on me in seconds, grabbing me and pulling me back towards the house. Panic surged through me, but then a distant sound cut through the chaos. Police sirens. The men hesitated, looking at each other before sprinting towards the fence. They climbed over and disappeared into the night. Moments later, the police arrived, their flashing lights painting the scene in red and blue. I pointed in the direction the men had gone, and officers took off after them while another stayed with me. I was shaking, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. As the police questioned me, Matt and Jason showed up on their bikes, their faces pale with worry. I thanked them repeatedly, knowing their quick actions had likely saved my life. The police found 4 knives and a couple of loaded pistols left behind in the house, a chilling reminder of how close I had come to real danger. To this day, I often think about that night, about how a simple birthday gift and a quiet Saturday evening turned into a harrowing experience. It's a story I share with caution, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of quick thinking and good friends.